So the point of today's video is to show you the most obscure facts that you may not know about rabbits that will really help both you and your rabbits out tremendously. If you learned something new during this video, please drop a comment and tell me what that thing was, and if you make it through the whole video without learning something new, I would like to know that too, please. Hi, I'm Sarah with Cedar Hills Homestead. I've got a small homestead up here in northwestern Montana, and I have had the privilege of raising rabbits for 8 or 9, maybe 10 years total. The first time I raised them, I was in middle and high school with 4-H, and that was a great learning experience, but I never butchered rabbits at that time. And now I am not currently showing rabbits, and I'm not with 4-H right now, but I have been raising rabbits and butchering them for their meats and their pelts. And I have absolutely loved the experience, and I've learned even more recently. I'm going to start out strong with a very embarrassing one that I have been doing wrong this whole time up until about a year ago. And I have talked to countless show people and 4-H leaders, and they have all also been doing this super wrong. You can't pick rabbits up the same way you would like a feral cat by the scruff of their neck. That is actually tearing their skin, and since rabbits are so quiet and they don't want you to know when they're in pain, they will not let you know that. So in the past year where I have been picking them up correctly, the easiest thing that I've found is to corner my rabbits, put one hand over their eyes so that way they calm down a little bit, and then use your other hand to kind of scoop under their belly. When you are bringing them in or out of their cage, make sure that you're watching all 4 feet, because it is very possible for them to get that caught on the entry of their cage or their carrier and break a leg. I actually saw a 4-H kid do that back in like 2010, and it was terrible. Honestly, the best advice I have for that is to pick your rabbits up as often as you can so that way they're used to you and it's not a panic, and to give yourself plenty of time to go pick them up and whatever movement you need to do. Make sure you have plenty of time and you're not rushing it, so that way there aren't any injuries happening. On that same note, I said that mama rabbits will not pick their babies up by the scruff of their neck, and that is because they are just not very maternal creatures. I will circle back to that in a minute, but a lot of people, when they first start out raising rabbits, they are very afraid to go pick up those babies and move them around or check on them in their nest, and it is completely fine to do that. I honestly think a lot of our human parents told us that the mamas would reject their babies by picking them if we picked them up, just so that way we would stop bringing in all these wild animals and dropping them on their clean counters in the kitchen. And not only can you pick up the babies when they are first born, but I actually really recommend you do so. It's good to have a head count on how many are born and see if you have any stillborns or any who passed away shortly after birth, and take those out of the nest right away. In the wintertime, they're going to make the other babies cold by having a frozen body, and in the summertime, they're going to bring in all kinds of terrible bugs, especially maggots that you really don't want in your delicate little nest. If at all possible, take your babies out of the nest every single day to do a head count and check the nest and make sure it's nice and clean and that mom isn't making a mess in there, because a lot of the first time moms will. In the process, you're getting those new babies really used to people, and by the time they're big enough to move off into their own space, you're going to have a much better relationship with that rabbit, and it is going to make your life and their life much more peaceful. Now, I'm not sure if this counts as obscure information or not, but if possible, breed 2 does or more at the same time, so that way if you have a mama who rejects her babies or a mama who dies during the birthing process, you have a surrogate to give the babies to. You definitely can bottle feed your babies and take care of them that way, but it is very difficult. In a lot of ways, I think they're a lot more delicate than newborn kittens, and especially more delicate than new puppies. So if possible, let another mama raise them. She's going to do a much better job than you probably will. Mama rabbits will only feed their babies once or maybe twice a day, each feeding only being about 5 minutes long. It is extremely rare for you to ever catch them nursing their babies, so you need to learn the difference between a full baby belly and an empty one. Okay, so I said that rabbits aren't very maternal a minute ago, so let me expand on that. When I have a brand new mama who is about to have babies for the first time, I try to make sure that she is doing so when it is not going to freeze even overnight, especially not during the day, but definitely not overnight, because one, when she has her babies, she may not necessarily know that she needs to have them in the hutch or in the nesting box, and she will have them somewhere where they will freeze to death very quickly. Number 2 is because those babies will latch on to their mamas to nurse. Sometimes that mom gets tired of it and she will jump out of the box or the hutch when she feels like it, while that baby is still attached to her, which will essentially fling that baby out of the hutch or the nest, and again, will freeze to death. So my more seasoned rabbits, I'm fine with them having babies in the winter when it is freezing, but For those brand new moms who don't know what they're doing, it really does help to have them having their babies when it is warmer, and you're going to have more of a chance to catch them being out of the nest before they just completely freeze and die. If and when you finally end up with dead kits, which is a baby rabbit, there are two really good options that you have for taking care of those babies. Number one is to put them in your compost bin. They are full of good nutrients that are going to take good care of your compost pile and then eventually your soil. Or option two, which I think is more interesting and probably less known, is to sell them to reptile people. They are all about the new baby kits because they're small, they've got all kinds of those good nutrients that their reptiles need. And sometimes you can take them to rehab centers, places that have birds of prey or rehabilitated animals in general that are meat eaters. That is very helpful for them, and then that gives some kind of a purpose to the life of that little lost little one. Speaking of compost, you do not have to compost your rabbit manure. That can actually go straight into your garden. It will not burn your plants, and it won't cause any trouble for you like fresh chicken manure would. So that is a welcome sight for many homesteaders, especially those of us who are impatient and just want to get the garden going and put some nitrogen in there without having to wait on the compost pile to be ready. Now, I told you that rabbit manure is cold, and that is a perk for sure, but it has its downfalls too. And what I mean by that is whatever seeds or plants you put through that rabbit can absolutely still be viable as seeds when they come back out of the rabbit. So if you're feeding your rabbits tomatoes as treats or oats or whatever it is, there's a very good chance that you're going to get a surprise plant or two in your garden. I think that is a fun little surprise, but you may not appreciate that as much as I do. Now, if you've had rabbits for any amount of time, you probably know this already, and that is that most vets will absolutely not work on your rabbits. Sorry, you're just out of luck. So when you first get into rabbits, it might be a nice idea to build your own first aid kit and just to have a basic idea of what to expect from your rabbits and have a basic understanding of how their bodies work, what they need, and some of their nutritional needs, which I'll touch on in a minute. And just being able to not only have the willingness, but also the confidence to be your own vet or know when the time is to call, that is a hard call, your rabbits when they need you to do so. That is going to be very beneficial for your rabbits, for you to have that information so that way you can make their lives as easy and painless as possible. Most rabbits are not going to let you know that they're sick or in pain because, like I said, they are prey animals, and that is something that will make them much more weak and susceptible to predator attacks, and they don't know that you're not a predator, so they don't know that they can trust you, or a lot of them don't anyway. A lot of them don't know that they can trust you, so you need to look for some of the sneakier signs that your rabbit is not feeling good and go from there. A lot of people have asked if it's better to have your rabbits in a hot environment or a cold one, and I can definitely say with so much confidence that cold is way better than heat. Most people will say like 85 and on is too hot for a rabbit. I would go so far as to say that anything above 70 is pretty stressful for them. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have had negative 55 and negative 60 degrees here in northwestern Montana, and my rabbits have pulled through that perfectly fine. It's genuinely amazing how well they can do in those temperatures. Now, when we did hit negative 55, I did take my rabbits out of their cages, which are, you know, kind of open air, and off of the ground, which is much cooler. And I did put them in with my chickens overnight, and they did perfectly fine. I did have some babies that I was worried about, and I brought them in the house. You do need to worry about pneumonia doing such an extreme temperature change, but I generally know how to take care of a rabbit with pneumonia. I don't know how to unfreeze a rabbit, so that was my thinking, and that's why I brought my rabbits in the house. And surprisingly, none of them developed pneumonia or any other coughs or nastiness, and they did surprisingly well with that transition, so I was very happy with that, happy to get them through that very cold snap. When choosing a location for your new rabbits, I would strongly suggest on the north side of a building or somewhere that is heavily shaded and is going to give them a lot of protection from both the sunshine and just heat in general. I would strongly suggest keeping your rabbits in an area that you frequent or you can see from most windows inside your house, so that way you can keep a close eye on them, especially if you have predator problems. Personally, we keep our rabbit hutches about 20 feet away from the house. I can see them from my bedroom, so that way I've got an eye on them overnight. I can also see them from the living room, the dining room, the kitchen very well, and all of the children's bedrooms, so I always have a good look at my rabbits, even when I'm in the house. One morning while I was making breakfast, I just happened to look out the kitchen window and I saw a lynx was trying to get into that big 3x8 rabbit hutch. And I was so happy. I was so proud of myself to this hutch. One, held the rabbit in and the lynx out, and two, just bought me enough time to go out there and shoo the lynx away and tell him to go find a meal somewhere else. So if I didn't have that in that location, I'm sure my rabbits would have been eaten that morning. So whenever possible, keep them very close to your house. And I think it's important to say that rabbits are very clean animals, and as long as you are cleaning up after them every day, there's not going to be a stink or a smell. And in our case, we don't even have flies around our rabbits. So yeah, just take really good care of them, and you can keep them close to the house. They're not going to be a nuisance. They're not going to be a problem. They certainly don't make noise. Now, full disclosure, I do have chicken wire on my rabbit tractor, one rabbit tractor for my grow outs, and on the front of one of my hutches for my grow outs. But that is certainly not recommended for rabbits. It will not keep them in if they don't want to be kept in, and it really won't do a good job of keeping predators out. So I'm telling you not to do that while I'm actually actively doing that right now. So I will eventually change that, but it's good for you to know that. Do not under any circumstances have that underneath your rabbits as their footing. That is going to cut their little feet up, and that's not a good time. Don't do that to them, okay? If you're watching this video right now and you have chicken wire, I'm not getting after you, but take a piece of plywood or cardboard or something and just put that on the bottom of their cage until you can go through and replace that. That will protect their feet. Yes, you'll have to replace those pieces more often, but you'll keep them much more comfortable and a lot safer in the meantime until you can get that changed out to something a little better. 14 or 16 gauge wire is definitely the best. I started out with 1x1 inch wire for the bottoms of my rabbit cages, and if you have something larger like an American chinchilla rabbit, which is like a 12-pound rabbit, a lot of their manure is not going to fall through the cage holes on that. So you need to do like a 1x2 hole or something like that, not a 1x1, and certainly not a 1/2x1/2 wire, because you're gonna have to clean that out every single day for whatever buildup they have. Just about any time that I talk about rabbits on short form social media sites like TikTok, Instagram, and even Facebook, I get a lot of comments about people saying that they don't believe that rabbits are a very efficient food source, and if they were, then they would be raised commercially instead of just in backyards. But I'm gonna tell you the real reason why rabbits are not raised commercially, and that is because they need much more clean air than a chicken does. Rabbits only need 2 or maybe 4 total air changes per hour, so that is very little airflow that's needed for them to keep them alive and keep them laying eggs or growing at a desirable rate for their meat, whereas rabbits need like 8 to 10 complete air changes per hour. It is just not practical to do that on a large scale, and that is why the rabbits just have not taken off with commercial growers. Rabbits will not reproduce if they are not happy and if their nutrition needs aren't already met. So if you've got a rabbit who is not getting everything that she needs, or she is stressed all the time, or she's just generally unhappy, she is not going to have babies. Their unwillingness to breed in subpar conditions is a real pat on the back for small ethical breeders and a gigantic obstacle for corporations, and the reason why you aren't really going to see rabbits raised in a large commercial space. If you're not sure about the whole raising rabbits from babies and then butchering them when they get to be fully grown, I've got 2 things here for you that will hopefully ease your mind and make this whole thing a lot easier for you. For me, it is much easier to raise and then butcher rabbits that all look the same. So for instance, I raise American chinchilla rabbits and they are all gray. They start out as little gray babies and they stay totally solid gray from birth all the way up until butcher date. So that way it is much harder to pick one single baby out of that you just absolutely fall in love with and have to keep. I think that makes it much easier when you've got little kids running around too, because they always see little gray baby bunnies in this hutch and adult rabbits in this hutch, and they all look the same. And as you rotate through your rabbits, there are no major changes, so that way your kids always have little babies to play with, and they've always got the big adults to reach up and pet and bring their little treats to. And overall, I think it's much easier and more palatable for them. My kids absolutely know that we are raising our rabbits for food, and they respect that, but I do think it's much easier that they are not involved right now while they're 4 and 5 years old, that they're not involved with the actual dispatch process, and they just know that there is a constant stream of new babies coming in, so that way they always have someone to love on and appreciate and bring their little treats to. Now, some people in several rabbit breeder groups will disagree with me, but your breeders can absolutely be your pets. And honestly, your grow out rabbits can be too. I treat my rabbits all the same. They are all like pets to us. We go out and we give them their treats and we give them lots of attention, and we just love being around them. That's why we have them in the first place. We genuinely love being around them, and we let ourselves get attached, and I think that's fine. Our breeder rabbits all have names. I like it that way. I'm totally fine with that. I think that's fine. And if you need the reassurance that you can do the same, here it is. If you are struggling with the idea of eating an animal that you raised up all on your own, I completely understand that. Like I said, I used to have 4-H rabbits when I was a kid, from like middle school all the way through high school and a little bit after that into college. And I never ever butchered a rabbit at that time. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I'm a softie too. Don't feel like I've just always been like this and I've always just been able to butcher my own rabbits, because that has absolutely not been the case. But like I said, I am raising rabbits for meat and pelts right now, and the only reason I'm able to do that is because I had this big mindset shift about it, and that has made this much easier for me to wrap my head around and feel ethical about. And my thought process is that my rabbits come into this world with a good mother and a clean, neat nest. They have all of the food they could ever want. They always have clean water. They will quite likely never ever be scared in their entire life. Maybe the very first time we start the tractor somewhere near the hutches, they might startle a little bit, but genuinely, they just don't have any fear. They don't have any hunger. They've always been surrounded by their litter mates from the time they're born all the way up until I move them away from their mothers and then move them in with the rest of their litter mates to the new grow out hutch. They're always with friends. They've always got good food. They've always got enrichment activities. So they're living a very good life. They see me as the bringer of food, or the person who transports them out into their rabbit tractor, which is their fun little outdoor place where they get to enjoy the sunshine and the grass and just enjoy their days. So they are not fearful of me, and they see me as a good force in their life. And then when their harvest day comes, I do not restrict their food. I do not restrict their water. They have access to everything. I take them out of the hutch. I set them on the ground with some food in front of their face, because who doesn't want to go out while eating? And I let them sit there with their food for a second, calm down. I can tell when they're really calm. I lay a stick over the back of their neck while they're eating, and then all at once I just pull up and it's lights out for them. They're just gone. So they literally go out while they're eating. They're on the ground. They're happy. And that makes it so much easier for me to feel good about how I'm raising and treating my animals. They do not have a bad day, and they don't even have a bad moment when it's time for them to go. And they either go that way, or you keep them in their cage until they're old and they start having joint problems, or they start having health issues, or goodness, maybe you have to sell them and then they go to someone else who is not consistent with the good feed and not consistent with giving them water. Or you could have a predator come up and get into the cages or scare them or pull them through the cages. Dogs are very, very bad about that. So if you take them out on your terms, then you are guaranteeing that they're not going to go on very bad, scary, or painful terms. If you live in an area where there are stray dogs or roaming dogs, you should do something to enclose the bottom of your hutches or your cages, because you are almost guaranteed to make sure that those dogs are going to come in and bother your rabbits at some point or another. The bottom of one of my hutches is actually enclosed by the chicken run, so my chickens can go underneath of the rabbits, and that is one way to keep predators out. For the rest of my rabbits, I have them inside an electric fence, and this electric fence is actually a 12,000 volt, supposed to be bear-proof fence. If you're not a farm kid or an ag person, most 4,000 volt fences will keep cattle in. So this one is 12,000. It so far has done an excellent job of keeping the bears and the wolves and the cats out, with the exception of that lynx who jumped it. It's done a very good job of keeping those out, and it's made sure that my chickens and rabbits and my goats are all safe all the time, and I don't have to worry about that. If you haven't got into raising rabbits yet and this is your research phase, I want to tell you right now that if you have livestock, you are going to have dead stock, and I do not want you to feel guilty about losing a rabbit here or there, because it happens to everybody at some point or another, and that is part of the learning process. I know you're thinking that you can do enough research to make sure that that doesn't happen, and in some cases some people can, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind that in big commercial places, whether it is chickens or turkeys or sheep or swine or cattle, they are in much larger they're in much larger populations, and it is so easy for a disease or some sort of a mistake to happen. Maybe the barn gets too hot, or the water runs out and no one checks it in time, or a terrible disease sweeps through there. When that happens, they lose hundreds, if not thousands, of animals all at once. So everyone's going to make mistakes, but you're on the small scale, which means that your mistakes are not going to be quite as deadly or quite as devastating. So keep that in the back of your mind and don't feel bad when something eventually happens. Rabbits are not overly time consuming, and I really appreciate that about them. I do not know exactly how long it takes me to just take care of my rabbits, but I have chickens and goats and my rabbits, and in the wintertime, it's usually like 20 minutes total to take care of all of them. In the summertime, it's probably closer to 40 minutes morning and evening, because I'm moving my goats to pasture and I'm watering more of the animals more often. And what else? Oh, I'm pulling all of the forage I need for my rabbits and bringing that to them, or I'm physically grabbing my rabbits and moving them out to their tractors for the day, because I don't trust my tractors to be out overnight and unwatched. So probably 40 minutes morning and evening in the summer when I'm doing all of that to make sure that they're taken care of, not using the feed store also, and 20 minutes morning and evening in the winter time, or that would probably be what it would be if I was using more of feed store feed instead of sourcing it myself. I do usually go out and check on my rabbits 2 times a day at minimum, usually like 3 to 5 times a day, just because I have little scraps to take out to my chickens, or I saw someone dump a water bowl or something like that, and I'll go fix that really quickly. So my rabbits really are getting attention like all day long. If you have a full-time job though, you are more than capable of still having rabbits. It would be great if you could take care of them twice a day, every day. If not, if you can only choose one time, I would really say to take care of them in the evening, because they are most active overnight. That is when they're going to eat the most and drink the most and run around the most. Really need to make sure that their food and water is topped off before the evening, so that way overnight while they're awake and moving around, they have access to what they need. Here is another mistake that I used to make back when I was a little 4-H kid who didn't know better. Rabbits should never ever run out of food or water. Now I knew that they shouldn't run out of water, but I did not realize how awful it was for them to run out of food. They are constantly producing saliva. In the same sense, when you smell something delicious and you start producing saliva, they never turn that off. So like you, if you smell something good and you're not able to eat right away, all of that extra saliva goes down in your stomach and makes it ache really badly. That's what's happening with your rabbits if you are not keeping constant sources of feed in front of them at all times. So it's like their stomach is eating them from the inside out. So do not let them run out of food even before butcher date. I know that some people like to withhold food from their rabbits about 24 hours before butchering, so that way it's like cleaner to butcher, but I have experience with wild animals and with domestic animals, so once you learn how to butcher an animal that's already got a full stomach, whether that's a chicken or a rabbit or a deer or whatever else, you already know how to work around that and be careful. So just build that skill up and be good at taking care of an animal with a full stomach, rather than making them suffer for like their last 24 hours of life. Now let's get more into the butchering side of rabbits. One of the things you're going to learn very quickly is that you are, much like the vet situation, you're probably not going to find someone who is willing to butcher rabbits for you. The exception to this might be if you have some Amish folks in your area, they might be willing to help you. Now I'm going to give you this number from like 2014, 2015, so this was quite literally 10 years ago. I knew that back then they would butcher rabbits and chickens for like $1 per animal. I'm sure it is much, much higher than that now, but it used to be very affordable. I don't know what it's like now. If you know, please comment down below. I would love to hear about that, because one, it's really rare to see people who are willing to butcher other people's rabbits and chickens now. And two, I would love to know what the rate is on that now in 2024 or later, whenever you're watching this video. Regardless, the point is that you're probably going to have to learn how to butcher these rabbits yourself, especially if you want them to be an economical option. The caveat to this is if you want to raise rabbits for the purpose of selling them to other people as food, because at that point they do need to be USDA inspected so that way they can be sold. There are a few states with different workarounds for that, for like, there's like farmers markets that allow it. It depends state to state. You need to check that out for your area. I don't think that applies where I'm at. If you know different, please tell me. But for the most part, if you are selling the meat to other people, you are going to have it the animal both dispatched and processed within somewhere where the USDA is watching and can inspect it and then make sure that it is fine for you to sell to another person. There are usually 4 dispatch methods for your rabbits. The one that I prefer is the broomstick method. You set your rabbit on the ground, let them eat some grass, enjoy their time, lay a broomstick or a piece of rebar or a stick over their neck, and step on the sides of the bar and pull up on their back feet all at once instantly, so that way it's all happening at the same time and your rabbit doesn't have a chance to be afraid. Option 2 is kind of a modification of option 1, and a lot of people will use option 1 for a while and then slowly move over to option 2 because they just get tired of the whole balancing process. So you have to be kind of balanced to be able to step on that rod at the same time and pull up all in one motion, so that way you're not scaring your rabbit. So option 2 is what people call a hopper popper. The hopper popper is usually a V-shaped thing, either wood or metal typically, hung on a wall or a tree or something of that effect, or maybe a fence around your eye level. And the idea is you slide the rabbit's head in here and then pull down all at once. So you get their head into this little pinch point, so that way it can't like come down, and then their head is stuck here, and then you pull the body down, and it gives them an instant cervical dislocation, so that way they don't know it's coming and they are instantly lights out. There's no pain whatsoever. A lot of people like this idea better because it is much faster. You don't have to put them on the ground and you're not trying to balance. And for a lot of people with mobility issues, this is the much better option. Method 3 is like a choke collar. You put the rabbit's head through a choke collar like what you would have for a dog. It's usually suspended from the ceiling. You put your rabbit's head through there, and just like the other 2 options, you kind of grab the back feet and just pull down all at once, so that way there's instant cervical dislocation, lights out, super fast. I do not recommend option 4, but I'm going to tell you anyways because I want to be as fair and transparent as possible, and that is people shooting their rabbits, usually with a BB gun right in the head. The reason I don't like this is because a rabbit's brain is extremely small. Their head is like this big and their brain is like this. It's super small and it's very easy to miss, and if you miss, that is a lot of pain, and then that rabbit is going to be moving a lot and you're going to have a very difficult time figuring out how to hit that spot, hit the right spot, so that way they're instantly out. So someone who is really experienced might be able to do this, but especially for beginners, I really don't recommend that. I don't think it's a good idea. Something I love about processing rabbits, especially for new homesteaders or new farmers, is the fact that a rabbit is basically a small cow or a small pig or a small deer. So once you have butchered a couple rabbits, it is very, very easy for you to move up and work on other animals and already know what the parts of the body are, what you're doing, and how to quickly skin that animal. Rabbits are very high in protein, very low in fat. Occasionally you will hear people talking about protein poisoning, and that is not something you need to worry about with your rabbits unless you're doing some extreme things with your diet. To suffer from rabbit protein poisoning, you would have to eat only the rabbit meat and none of the organs and none of the brain, and you would have to eat that with nothing else, no sides. You wouldn't be using butter or oils or any kind of fat to cook that, so it would be like a really dry and stringy rabbit meat. You would have to do that every day for like 3 to 6 weeks before you would start to experience protein poisoning. So I think for the average person that is never ever going to be an issue, but it's worth mentioning, so that way if you hear someone warning you about it, you know that they have just been misinformed and you don't have to worry about that, and hopefully you can actually educate them on the subject, because eating rabbit meat is not going to kill you. Now this is just a side note, but most of the people who are warning me about protein poisoning with rabbits are like gym bros who are eating protein by the scoop, which is so ironic and funny to me. Maybe you can appreciate that that irony as much as I do. Rabbit pelts are a natural byproduct of raising your rabbits up, so if you would like to have those pelts for other projects, you can absolutely keep those. With that said, I think that the best time to get pelts off of a rabbit is when they're like 6 months old or older, which is when I butcher my rabbits specifically so I can keep that pelt. If you are butchering them before then, the pelts are much, much softer and they're much weaker, and when you go to tan them, they're a lot more likely to tear or just absolutely fall apart while you're working them. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you want to keep pelts, you're probably going to want to keep those rabbits until they're a little bit older. Which the benefit of keeping them when they're older means that you're going to have more like 6 pounds of meat from a 12-pound rabbit rather than 1 or 2 pounds of meat off of a 5-pound rabbit. So what does rabbit meat taste like? Rabbit meat, if chicken is right here in the middle and turkey is over here where it's just a little bit drier than chicken with a slightly different flavor, then your rabbits are going to be over here where they're like a slightly wetter version of a chicken. But I think the best way to describe it is a chicken thigh, where it's just a little bit oily and it's got a lot more flavor, and it tastes like a dark meat, but all of a rabbit is a white meat. I don't know if you knew that or not, but all of a rabbit is a white meat, but it tastes like a very flavorful, very juicy dark meat on a chicken. And if you cook your rabbit meat just right, it is going to be nearly indistinguishable or totally indistinguishable from chicken meat. So that makes it very easy to get the rest of your family and friends on board with it, especially after you make a couple good meals like that. I do have a couple videos here on my YouTube channel on how I cook rabbit meat, so be sure to check those out. That does make it a lot easier. Probably my #1 recipe for brand new starters would be the oven-baked barbecue rabbit. Oh, and rabbit meat is best for people with sensitive stomachs, so people who have a hard time with beef or lamb or chicken will oftentimes go to rabbit meat. That also applies to your pet. So if you have a pet with a food allergy, a lot of time it is recommended to either put them on alligator or kangaroo or rabbit meat. And I don't know about you, but rabbit meat is much easier for us to source than the other two options. Most rabbits are pregnant for only 30 days, and then they will wean their babies when they are 4 to 8 weeks old. I prefer around the 8-week mark if I can. If the rabbits are really bothering their mom and the mom seems fed up or she's just tired of them, I will move them sooner, closer to the 4-week mark. But generally speaking, they're only pregnant for a month, they only nurse them for a month, and then they are ready to butcher at 2 to 3 months. Now I butcher mine closer to the 6-month mark, so that way I have a very good high quality pelt. But for most people, it is when they hit 5 pounds as a live weight, or when they hit 12 weeks old, whichever comes first. A good estimate of kits per litter is usually 6 babies. Now, I will say that I have American chinchillas, and I don't know if it's the breeding of the ones I have or if it's the breed in general, but most of them are having 10 to 12 babies per litter, which is excellent for raising the meat and having those pelts. I would say expect around 6 kits per litter. Anything past that is a great bonus. You can technically let your rabbits breed 6 times per year, so 6 times 6 or 6 times 12 would be your total number of rabbits. I don't really recommend that. I like to let mine only do maybe 2 or 3 litters per year, just so that way they have a nice chill life and it's not too much on them. I want to take good care of them and make sure that they also have a good life while they're taking care of us. 1 buck and 2 to 4 does is going to be plenty for most families. If you have a really large family with like 8 or 9 kids and you want to eat rabbit meat more often, you might want to go up to like 6 or 7 rabbits with 6 or 7 does and 1 buck. You can absolutely do that, but for the most part, most families, between 2 does and 4 does is plenty. For example, I have 1 buck and 4 does, and if I let each of those does have just 2 litters per year, which is pretty low by most people's standards, and they're having around 10 babies per litter, we're looking at 8 litters times 10 babies per litter, so that is 80 babies. 8 litters with 10 babies per litter, and then butchering them at 5 pounds live weight would give you around 3 pounds of actual meat per rabbit. So you're looking at 80 times 3, so that would be 240 pounds total of meat just coming from your 4 does and 1 buck every single year. Now I like to let my rabbits get bigger so that way I get to keep the pelt and it's a good quality pelt. So that means that my rabbits are going to be more like 12 pounds, which means they're going to give me closer to 6 pounds of meat, which is double what it would be when they were 3 months old. So instead of it being 240 pounds of meat, it would be 480 pounds of meat per year for that 4 does and 1 buck. How much your animal eats and how quickly they grow is greatly dependent on not only their living conditions, but also their breeding. So you can do your absolute best and you can be giving the best feed and the best care to animals, but if they just don't have the genetics to back it up, they're not going to be growing very quickly, which means they're going to cost you time and money, more so than a well-bred rabbit. They do not have to be registered. They don't need to be pedigreed with the ARBA or anything like that. Mine are, but they absolutely don't have to be like that. The main thing is that they have good breeding and you're getting them from a breeder who is keeping track of their weights and knows good body conformation and is sticking to the standards of what the ARBA has set, which is usually set so that way your rabbits have the most meat on them and they have the best build for being meat animals. You can absolutely dispatch and process a whole rabbit in less than 5 minutes. I will link down in the description to another video of someone who is just doing a really quick job on it. I have a thorough dispatching video, but I'm not doing it quick. I'm going through and explaining all the parts of the rabbit So my video is not quick at all, but there are people who just speed through it, and I think it's really important for you to see just how speedy the process can be. If you're getting 3 to 6 pounds of meat per rabbit and you can butcher a rabbit in 5 minutes, in 1 hour you can have way more meat from a group of rabbits than you could an entire deer or even an elk. Next, you absolutely have options when it comes to feeding your rabbits. I don't think that any way is necessarily better than the others. I just think that there are many different options, and it's possible for you to choose the one that is most suitable for your homestead and for your lifestyle. You can feed your rabbits straight pellets from the feed store that is very well formulated, it's well rounded, it's going to have everything that your animal needs to thrive, and all in all, it's a great option. It really is. Now, I am not doing that option because I like to source feed locally from our own homestead here. That is, for one, much more cost effective, and two, it lets me know exactly what's in the feed for my rabbits. Pellets are a good option. The only downside I would say to pellets is that some rabbits will overeat on them, and as a result you'll need to limit how much you're feeding them, which means that your rabbits are going hungry at some point, which is not great, or you're just overfeeding them. Like, your options are to feed them enough or let them go hungry. I had a visitor stop by, but I'm back again. If you want to go the pellet route, I would probably recommend adding in just a little bit of hay or alfalfa, probably horse quality, to the side, so that way they get to have that enrichment and the activity of eating all day while it's not going to make them too overweight. You can also forage for your rabbits, which is what I do. I have a whole video on that of how to feed your rabbits without the feed store. I'll make sure I link that down in the description and maybe here on the video if I can figure that out. But long story short, in that video I talk about how to do it with forage only, and also how you can grow grains if you want to grain finish your rabbits as well. So you get both options, and I think that's a pretty comprehensive video. That video also talks about rabbit nutrition, how the rabbit's body works, and it gives you exactly a breakdown of what you need for protein percentage, fiber percentage, carbohydrates, and all of your micro and macro nutrients too. Now, I have heard some people say that they absolutely refuse to feed their rabbits any hay or alfalfa that is not already in their pellets, because they don't like something that the animal can go to the bathroom on and then turn around and eat. In my experience, it's not an issue, it's a non-issue. Maybe they have different personalities of their rabbits, but I've never experienced that. In a few instances where they have gone to the bathroom on their hay, they tend to put that hay off in their bathroom area, and then the rest of it's clean. It's very, very rare for them to mix up their kitchen and their bathroom. I have also heard people complain about the fact that if you put hay in the cage, then a lot of the droppings aren't going to just naturally fall through the bottom of the cage, which is valid, but I just scrape that out every day. I don't mind at all. I don't know, I think that's a non-issue. I think it's totally worth the effort to just scrape a little hay out every day, so that way they have that enrichment and they get to enjoy themselves while they're eating. You have several options for housing your rabbits. You've got your hutches, which is like a big wire cage with an enclosed building. That's probably my favorite. It's probably the most expensive option, but I do like it the best. You've also got your cages. You can have those hanging or stackable with individual trays in between each of them, so that way your rabbits are much more space efficient. I think that's a great option. You can also do colonies or rabbit tractors, where you move your rabbits out onto pasture and you move their little, basically an oversized cage along every day, so that way they have access to grass every day. That's a great option. You can also do colonies. I don't have that much experience with them, so I'm not going to talk about them here. I don't want to talk about things that I don't have experience with. From what I've seen though, it seems like that's something you need to have some experience before you jump into that. So maybe start with a cage or a hutch and move your animals out into a rabbit tractor every day if you want them to have that grass and freedom and sunshine. But I probably wouldn't start with a colony to begin with, because you have to understand their dynamics and keep the rats out of there and keep the mice out of there, because those things love to eat baby rabbits. So yeah, probably don't start with a colony, start with something else, and then when you feel confident, then you can move into the colony territory. On that note, literally everything will chase a rabbit or try to eat a rabbit. Your stray dogs are probably the #1 culprit. They are absolutely terrible. Dogs love to chase rabbits, and even if your dogs can't necessarily like pull the whole rabbit through, they're very likely to grab the bottom of their feet and pull down, which is awful. It's a terrible way for them to die. Another thing is that rabbits stress very easily, so even if that dog isn't getting direct contact with your rabbit, they can still chase them around the cage and scare them enough that they die of a heart attack. Dogs are bad, raccoons are bad. Raccoons have little hands, so they can oftentimes open the latches. So you have to, if you're in an area with raccoons, make sure that it is raccoon proof. Bears are bad. Obviously, all cats are bad, from house cats all the way up to mountain lions. They will go after a rabbit too. Squirrels are what I like to call opportunistic carnivores, and that is that they will rob nests of both rabbits, baby rabbits, and birds. Anything that they can find that is small and edible, even if it is meat, they will absolutely do that. So make sure that your local squirrels can't reach through the cage and pull your brand new babies out, because they will, and that is a terrible time. While rabbits and chickens can absolutely have the same ailments, they don't share the same exact parasite. So while they might have the same type of parasite, it is not the exact same strain or species of that parasite, so you don't have to worry about them sharing it. It is fine to house your rabbits over top of your chickens and let your rabbit droppings fall down, and your chickens will actually sift through and eat a lot of those, surprisingly, and cut down on your chicken feed bill if you would like to do that. I actually made the floor of my chicken coop cobblestone, so that way it is dig proof and I can put my rabbits in there in an emergency, like when it's negative 55 outside. So that way my rabbits are safe in there, they're warm in there, they can commingle with the chickens, and they're not going to dig out of the bottom. Now, two things you want to watch for. You don't want your chickens jumping on top of your rabbit cages, because you don't want them making your rabbits dirty, because chicken poop is very gross, and you don't want that all over your super soft, sweet little bunnies. And number two is that your chickens are going to bed at about the same time that your rabbits are waking up for the night. So as my chickens are going to sleep for the night right on their roost, my rabbit is on just the other side of the wall, and that buck is running circles. He's happy that it's nighttime. He's happy for all of his food. He's having a great time. And him running laps wakes my chickens up. So my roosters will crow just about every time that that buck is doing his happy little zoomies around the cage. So maybe keep that in mind. That's probably not an issue for most people, but your rabbits can absolutely keep your chickens up at night. When you go to buy your supplies, you're going to find that you can buy water bottles or water bowls. I highly recommend the bowls if you're in a cold area that is going to have any amount of freezing or frost, because the long little tube, the nipple or tip on that bottle, is going to freeze really quickly, and it's completely unusable when that freezes. So you have to take the bottles down and replace them with bowls in the winter. And for me, I just don't like having the extra storage. I don't like how hard it is to clean those bottles out. I don't like how difficult it is to clean out the neck of that bottle. And I don't like trying to clean that little metal ball in there. So for me, I just like to have the bowls and use that year round. I like the rubber bowls probably the best, because those are the easiest ones to break the ice out of. When it is that darn cold out here, it will freeze solid within a couple hours. So what I'll do is just throw it on the ground and stomp the back of that bowl, and it'll all come out in one big round piece of ice, and then you can just refill it. It's super easy that way. The only issue I have come into with the bowls is during the summertime, my rabbits get very agitated. Even in northwestern Montana, they don't like the warmth, which usually it's like 75 degrees here, but they get frustrated when it's hot, and when they get frustrated, they throw their things around, including that bowl. So in the summer, I have to check their bowls more often to make sure that they didn't just throw those in a fit of rage in the summer, and make sure that they always have clean, fresh water. Oh, rabbits are lagomorphs, and they are not rats. Some people have that mistaken for some reason. You really should know how to read nutrition labels and know all of the nutritional needs of your rabbit. I am going to put a graph up here on the chart. I'm taking this from the How to Feed Your Animals Without the Feed Store video that I've got here on my channel. So go ahead, take a screenshot of that if you want, or pause it, take notes if you need to. Look at that, memorize that, and always keep that in the back of your mind, whether you are mixing your own feed or growing your own feed or just buying something from the feed store. You should know what a good quality feed looks like. If you're willing to get just a little bit creative, it's not very difficult to recuperate your feed cost. For example, a pair of rabbit ears, you can throw that in a dehydrator or just freeze it and give that to dogs. A lot of dog people will be happy to pay $5 per ear or per set of ears for that. The little feet, if you want to dehydrate the feet, you just put them into a container of borax, put it on top of your fridge, forget about it for a few months. That's what I did. You can sell those for about $5 a foot, and people are happy to pay that. You can also just dehydrate those and feed them straight to dogs. Dog people will pay it as a treat too. It costs about $1 per pelt to brain tan them, which is the method that I use. I've got a video on that too. I'll make sure that's also linked down in the description. It costs about $1 per pelt, and in exchange you can get like $25 to $40 per pelt back. You can also sell manure. I've seen it go for $5 for a 5-gallon bucket, and I've also seen it go for $15 or $20 on Etsy for a little bitty bag like this. So whatever you're willing to test out and see what'll work in your area, or something that you're willing to ship, yeah, you can play with that and see what people want to buy and how much they want to buy it for and whatever. Of course, you can also sell the very best kits out of your litter. I don't recommend selling rabbits that aren't good quality, that you wouldn't want to show or raise more rabbits out of, because you want to leave the breed better than you found it. If your rabbits are registered and / or rare, you are going to get more for them. My live rabbits sell for 75 for a buck and 100 for a doe, and I have no problem selling them. There's always a list of people who are happy to come get them, and sometimes drive 7 hours or more to come get them. Even your mature rabbit pelts, rabbits that are 6 months or a year old or even older, they still have their limits. Like, they are much better quality and much tougher than your younger babies, but at the same time, they are not going to be quite as strong as a deer or an elk or a moose, or definitely not a bear. So I would not recommend using those as like woolies, which I'll show a picture of here, but they are good for mittens and coats, like the inside of your coat. Hats, things like that. I am currently saving mine up to make a king-size quilt. It'll be like a patchwork quilt of different pelts that way. So that's your options. They're pretty strong, but they're not strong enough that you would want them to be like the outside material on something that you would use outside. Most people are more inclined to think that the really large rabbit breeds end up making better meat rabbits, but that is not necessarily the case. For example, the Flemish Giants are 22 pounds, whereas most of the meat rabbits that I have mentioned are like 8 to 12 pounds. The problem with the Flemish Giants is that they grow their bones first, because that is such a big animal. They have to prioritize their bone structure over the meat. So before they grow any of that meat, they're growing all of that bone, which means it takes much, much longer for them to be ready. And when you do finally harvest them, you're going to find that there's a lot more bone to meat compared to your smaller rabbits. You absolutely can raise rabbits for fiber, but generally speaking, your fiber rabbits are not quite so good as meat rabbits. They're just slower growing, and they don't have quite as much meat on them. Their feed conversion ratio is not quite so good. So it's probably best if you have 2 separate lines of them, if you want to have both options available to you, rather than trying to find one that's going to be a dual purpose option. Okay, so there you have it, 55 obscure facts you may not have known about rabbits. If you made it through this whole video and you knew all of these, please tell me, and tell me how many years you've been raising rabbits. I would love to know that. And bonus, please drop something else that I may not know down in the comments, please. If you did learn something new, tell me what that was. I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure you go check out the How to Feed Your Rabbits Without the Feed Store. It is my second most video watched here on YouTube, only topped by the How to Feed Your Chickens Without the Feed Store video. I've got a whole series with all kinds of different animals. They are very in-depth, and I think they're pretty helpful. If you've already seen that video, make sure you go check out the How to Brain Tan Your Rabbits with Real Brains video. I think I'm the only person here on YouTube who actually shows you how to brain tan a rabbit with their brains. I don't think anyone else does that. It is a 3-part series, and it shows you how to tan the hide for about $1 each. I think you can actually get that down to 50 cents if you buy one of those ingredients in bulk. I talk about that in the other video. Thank you for letting me talk at you this long, and I'll see you in the next video. Coffee is a non-negotiable. Yeah, I'll be out in like 10 minutes.